Hello, today what we are going to do is we are going to talk a little bit about your stack up assignment. I'm going to try to walk you through the process that you need to follow in order to get this completed. So for the first stack up assignment, or the first part of it is you're going to be doing a clearance stack up for this picture, which is basically a drill press. And what we are looking for is the clearance space that exists between the the bottom of the platform and the top of the foot pedal. And you can see that I did that in this picture with this red dimension here, okay? Now there are 6 dimensions in the stack up, and it should begin with the platform height of 50 millimeters. So basically, I'm looking for this space that's right here. I can either start up here on the line or I can start down here on that line. Now, because I've elected to start on the upper line, the first dimension that's going to appear is that 50. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and draw my line for my orientation marker. And since I want the clearance below the line, I'm going to use a plus here and a minus there. Okay. Now, what I like to do when I'm walking through this, and you guys remember that I've done this in class before, is I like to pretend that I'm a tiny ant and I'm walking through the dimensions to get through the components in the assembly. So I'm going to start, and I'm going to use a different color here. That way it's different from the red. I'll use the blue in this case. So if I'm starting here at this point, and I'm going to the top of the platform, that's my first dimension. And I'm basically going to be traveling eventually back to this red line. So once I'm there at that blue line, I'm going to be going up to the next dimension I see is right here, okay? So if I take a look, there's an 800 max and a 0 min. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just cut that in half and say that that's an average of 400, okay? Now the next dimension that I have here is shown in the picture. I'm going from this point. And let me erase these other markers here. I'm going from this point here and this marker to up here in this area. And I'm just traveling through the parts. I'm erasing the marks as I go. Now I'm at this level. I can basically go all the way down to the bottom of the part. So if I put my marker here, and I can go all the way down to the bottom of the part here. Okay, that's that next step. And then I'm walking through over to this side of the part because that line goes all the way across here. And I'm eventually going to work my way up to the foot pedal. So I'm going down from this blue line to this area right here. And then finally, I'm going to end up at the top of my foot pedal where I want to be. So that's the first stack up there. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to scroll down to the second one. Now the second one is for the planer jack, and those dimensions are located all the way back here on the last page. There's the dimensions for the planer jack. So you'll have to flip back and forth between the picture and the dimensions here, okay? And I've given you information of what to use for tolerances. So we're going to go back and we're just going to use a picture of the assembly. This is the hand sketch I did to see what the clearances that we need. So the second clearance that we need is going to be finding the clearance between the jack screw and the table when the jack screw is fully engaged. When I say the jack screw is fully engaged, that means this screw is as far down as it could possibly go. So you can see that right here, on this level, this line right here, I've got that jack screw, it's down as far as it can go. So I want to see what kind of clearance I have. That way I know what size material I can put in there. Okay, so there you go. That's stack up number 2, and we're going to start that in just a second. Okay, so since I am doing this stack up now, what I can do is I can either start at the bottom here where the table is, or I can start here. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start here, and I'm going to use my red pen to put my marker here, right here on the line. And then I'm going to make sure that I put my orientation here. And by the way, if you're having trouble with imagining the orientation, whether it's minus plus or plus minus, you can rotate the paper to the side to be able to get that. So this one arrow pointing down, I want a space here, so that's going to be positive, which means by default that one's negative. Now if I flip back to my blue pen and I go ahead and go through all my dimensions, the way my dimensions are, I'm going to have to eventually get to this, this surface on the bottom of the housing. So I'm going to start here first, and I'm going to go the length of my jack screw. That is the first dimension in my stack up, and that's been given to you, the 4.75. Okay. Now, once I get back to that edge of that ball there, I'm going to eventually have to work my way to this surface. So there's a few dimensions that I'm going to have to work through. I'm going to go from the edge of this ball to probably the ball edge to the hex surface, which basically means here. Okay, so that's the next dimension that I'm going to go through. And if I erase my line here, I'm here at this point now. Then I'm going to go to the edge, the other edge of my jack screw, that hex surface. I'm at that point now. And then I can go all the way down to the bottom of my housing, which is here. And then I have my result of my stack up, which is what I want. Okay, so that should help you with that one there. Okay, now the next one is going to be an engagement stack up, and this is going to be using the tool post, and the drawings for that are on this page. So you'll have to scroll back and forth between this particular page and the assembly sketch that I've created. Okay. Now what I mean by an engagement stack up is I want to know how much the screw has engaged inside of the tool post. So what I did is I changed my color to red, and you can see I put a dimension here. In actuality, the dimension that I want is from here to here. I want to know how much of the screw has passed through that tool post. So I'm looking for this space right here. This is the space that I'm looking for. Okay. Now, when I'm looking for my starting position, it's either going to be here or there, and I want to know how much it's engaged. So my starting position, what I've chosen is the very top of the tool post. So I'm going to go ahead and put my arrows, and my engagement stack ups always should be negative. So that means that this dimension here that I'm looking for is going to be a minus, which means by default this direction here is going to be a positive. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and change my marker color to blue so we can walk through the dimensions there. Okay. Now, as I scroll through, let's get the entire picture on the screen so you can see. As I scroll through, you'll see that I'm going to be jumping around to the various parts, but you can kind of see what we're doing here. We've got 6 dimensions in the stack up. So I'm starting at this position here, and I'm going to be going all the way down to the tool post. The tool post basically ends on the table. So I'm going from this surface to this surface. Okay, now that I'm at this surface, I'm going to erase this here. Now the washer and the tool post, they basically sit on the same surface, which means I can go to the thickness of the washer. And I'm doing that now here. Okay. Now then I'm going to go to the block height. The block is going to be sitting on top of the washer. So I'll erase this bottom here. And then I'm going to basically go to the top of the block, which is right there. Okay. And then the next part here is I have to go to the top of the screw. So I'm going to erase this bottom line, and I'm going to basically travel to the top of the screw. Okay. Once I'm at the top of the screw, I can erase this line here. And I'm going to travel down eventually to this end here. This is where I want to go. This is where I want to end up with, since that's the other end of my dimension. I may have to go through a few dimensions on the screw to be able to get to that point, but that's where I want to end up. So that's going to be my engagement. The distance between this line here and the distance between that line there. Okay. Moving on to my last stack up is a spring deflection stack up. Now with the spring deflection stack up, this one's a little bit special. These spring deflection stack ups, this we're going to be using the planar jack, which is on the last page. Now right now, if you take a look at this picture, there's no spring in there. So we're going to have to imagine the spring is going to be there. And you can see that's where I've drawn the spring in this picture. The spring that we're looking at is right here. It's these circles. Okay, it's basically I'm cutting a cross section through the spring. The very top here is basically the top edge of the spring. The very bottom is the bottom edge. Now I'm trying to figure out how much the spring deflects when I have this jack screwed down and then it's touching some sort of a platform in the bottom. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do. Now, whenever I'm doing a spring deflection stack up, I'm always going to start at one of the ends of the spring. Okay, so I've chosen to start at the top end, and my first dimension in a spring stack up is always going to be the free length of the spring. Now, since this side points to the free end of the spring, that means that's going to be my first dimension, and that free length of the spring is always going to be negative. So by default, this side is positive. Okay, and again, if you have trouble imagining this, going side to side, you can always take a screenshot of this or rotate it on the side, and that'll help you with knowing which directions. So my first dimension, I'll change my marker color to blue. I'm going to start here, and I'm going to go to the bottom of the spring. So that's my first dimension. Once I'm at that edge, I'm basically going to be going to basically the top of the table that the platform is sitting on. So I'm going to go to this edge. That's my second area. Okay. Once I'm finished that, I can go to the height of my platform, which is from there to there. Okay. And then I'm walking through again. Once I'm at that platform, I've got to basically go back through the jack screw. So I'm going to go to the entire length of the jack screw from here to there. And remember, my goal is to get back to this original red line. And that's another special thing about spring deflection stack ups. They start and end in the same location. Okay. And I'm going to erase this line here. And I'm going to have to go through this ball dimension to get to the shoulder of the hex. And once I do that, then I'm on my last dimension, which is the hex thickness, and then I've gone through my entire stack up. So I hope that helps you with your assignment. Please be sure to pause the video and rewind as you're working through, and that'll help you work through the dimensions.